Toxic people don't stop targeting you because they suddenly become good people. They stop because you stop being useful to them. And the moment you understand what they're really feeding on, you realize you've been holding the power all along. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to attract constant criticism, drama, or manipulation, while others walk through the same environment untouched, same workplace, same family, same circle, but completely different treatment? It's not luck, it's not status, and it's not aggression. It's something far quieter and far more powerful. Toxic behavior survives on reaction. It feeds on access. It grows in ambiguity. So when you remove the fuel, the fire searches for another source. Toxic people are rarely random in their behavior. They are driven by an internal need that often has little to do with you personally and everything to do with what they lack internally. At the core, many toxic patterns stem from insecurity. When someone feels inadequate, overlooked, or powerless, they search for ways to regain a sense of control. Targeting others becomes a strategy to stabilize their fragile self-image. By criticizing, belittling, or manipulating, they temporarily elevate themselves. It creates an illusion of superiority that soothes their hidden doubts. Control is another powerful driver. For some individuals, control equals safety. If they can predict your reactions, influence your decisions, or dictate the emotional tone of a relationship, they feel less anxious about losing relevance. This is why they often test boundaries, provoke reactions, or create small conflicts. Each reaction from you reassures them that they still have influence. Your anger, your defense, even your tears become proof that they matter. There is also a reward system at play. Emotional reactions act like fuel. When they trigger you and see visible impact, it reinforces their behavior. It becomes a loop: provoke, observe reaction, feel powerful, repeat. Over time, this pattern becomes habitual. They may not consciously plan every move, but the subconscious payoff keeps them engaged. Understanding this shifts your perspective. Their targeting is not evidence of your weakness or value, it is evidence of their internal imbalance. They are not choosing you because you deserve it. They are choosing you because, in that moment, you represent accessible control, accessible reaction, and accessible validation. Recognizing these underlying drivers removes the personalization and begins to weaken their influence. Toxic people are highly observant when it comes to emotional availability. They instinctively notice who reacts quickly, who over-explains, and who feels the need to defend themselves. Emotional reactivity becomes a signal. If a small comment triggers a big response, they register that as leverage. It tells them they have access to your emotional state. The stronger the visible reaction, the stronger their perceived influence. Over time, this creates a pattern where they push certain buttons simply because they know those buttons exist. Accessibility is another key factor. When someone is always available, always replying instantly, always agreeing to talk, always present for confrontation, it lowers the effort required to engage. Toxic individuals often prefer low-resistance environments. If reaching you is easy, confronting you is easy, and provoking you is easy, then targeting you becomes convenient. Convenience sustains repetition. They are less likely to invest energy where they encounter delay, distance, or controlled interaction. There is also the matter of boundaries. When boundaries are unclear, inconsistent, or verbally stated but not enforced, it creates open space. Toxic personalities test limits the way water tests cracks. If they push once and nothing happens, they push again. If they cross a line and are met only with explanation rather than consequence, they learn that the line is flexible. Flexible boundaries invite further pressure. Predictability plays a role as well. If your responses follow a familiar script, defend, argue, justify, they know exactly how to steer the interaction. Predictable reactions make manipulation efficient. In contrast, calm, brief, and measured responses introduce uncertainty. Without emotional payoff or easy access, the dynamic shifts. Toxic people often gravitate toward those who provide the highest emotional return with the lowest resistance. Boundaries without explanation are powerful because they remove negotiation from the equation. When you over-explain a boundary, you unintentionally turn it into a debate. You provide reasons, justifications, and emotional context, which gives the other person material to challenge. A toxic individual often sees explanations not as clarity, but as openings. They look for loopholes, emotional hooks, or inconsistencies they can question. The more you explain, the more they probe. What could have been a simple limit becomes a prolonged exchange where they attempt to wear you down. A boundary is not meant to convince someone. It is meant to define what you will and will not participate in. When you say, "I'm not available for that," and stop there, you communicate certainty. Certainty reduces their leverage. There is no emotional energy to grab onto, no argument to dismantle. It shifts the interaction from persuasion to decision. You are not asking for agreement. You are stating a condition. This approach also changes your internal posture. When you explain excessively, it often comes from a desire to be understood or approved of. That need can be sensed. Toxic personalities are highly attuned to hesitation because hesitation suggests flexibility. But when your tone is calm, brief, and final, it signals stability. Stability discourages further testing because it implies consistency. Over time, consistent enforcement without elaborate explanation builds a new pattern. The first few times may be met with resistance, pushback, or attempts to provoke guilt. However, without emotional debate, their tactics lose momentum. Boundaries expressed through behavior rather than discussion create clarity. They communicate that access to you is conditional, not assumed. That quiet firmness often reduces targeting because there is nothing left to argue with and nothing left to manipulate. Emotional neutrality removes the reward system that fuels toxic behavior. Many toxic dynamics operate on reinforcement. When someone provokes you and sees frustration, anger, or defensiveness, it confirms their ability to influence your emotional state. That confirmation becomes the payoff. It reassures them that they have impact and control. Even negative attention can feel validating to someone who thrives on dominance or disruption. The visible reaction is the prize. Neutrality interrupts this cycle. It does not mean suppressing feelings or pretending not to care. It means choosing a measured, steady response rather than an impulsive one. When your tone remains calm, your words are brief, and your body language is composed, the emotional hook fails to set. Without visible escalation, there is no surge of power for them to absorb. The interaction becomes flat, unrewarding, and difficult to steer. This approach also shifts the internal experience. Reactivity often pulls you into their frame, forcing you to defend, justify, or counterattack. Neutrality keeps you in control of your own frame. You respond on your terms, at your pace, without matching their intensity. That steadiness can feel unsettling to someone who expects turbulence. They may attempt to escalate at first, increasing sarcasm or pressure to provoke a crack in your composure. Consistency is crucial in this phase. Each calm response weakens the reinforcement loop. Over time, the absence of emotional payoff conditions them differently. If provoking you no longer produces drama, attention, or visible impact, the behavior loses efficiency. Toxic individuals often conserve energy for interactions that yield results. When neutrality becomes your default, you remove the incentive structure that once made you a reliable source of stimulation and control. If this is resonating with you, pause for a second and ask yourself, where have I been explaining instead of enforcing? That awareness alone shifts everything. Consistent behavior builds psychological safety because it signals predictability, and predictability reduces uncertainty. In healthy dynamics, this creates trust. In toxic dynamics, it creates clarity. When your reactions, boundaries, and standards remain steady over time, people know what to expect from you. There are no sudden emotional swings, no exceptions based on mood, no selective enforcement. That steadiness communicates that your behavior is not negotiable. It is anchored. Toxic individuals often rely on testing. They probe for moments of weakness, fatigue, or emotional overwhelm. If your standards shift depending on pressure, they learn that persistence pays off. One day you say no, the next day you give in after enough persuasion. That inconsistency teaches them that your boundary is temporary. But when your response remains the same regardless of circumstance, the testing becomes inefficient. They cannot find cracks because there are no fluctuations to exploit. Interestingly, While consistency builds safety for emotionally healthy people, it creates discomfort for manipulators who depend on unpredictability in others. When they cannot anticipate an emotional explosion or a defensive spiral, they lose strategic advantage. Your calm, repeated pattern forces them to confront a stable wall rather than a moving target. Stability removes drama, and drama is often their tool of influence. Consistency also strengthens your internal alignment. Each time you reinforce your standard, you reinforce your identity. You prove to yourself that your limits matter. This self-alignment radiates outward. People sense when someone is rooted versus when someone is wavering. Over time, the message becomes clear: access to you operates under fixed conditions. Without volatility to leverage or inconsistency to exploit, toxic behavior loses traction because the environment no longer supports it. Self-respect, expressed through action, changes group dynamics because behavior signals status more than words ever can. In any social environment, people constantly read cues about who tolerates what, who bends under pressure, and who stands firm. When you consistently honor your own limits, decline disrespect calmly, and disengage from manipulation without drama, you communicate value, not by announcing it, but by demonstrating it. That demonstration subtly recalibrates how others position themselves around you. Toxic individuals often test for tolerance levels. If sarcasm, subtle insults, or dismissive behavior are met with nervous laughter or silence driven by fear, they interpret that as permission. But when the same behavior is met with composed correction or quiet withdrawal, the signal changes. You are no longer participating in a hierarchy where you accept less to keep peace. You are defining your terms of engagement through action. Group dynamics are sensitive to shifts in posture. When one person raises their standard, others notice. Some may mirror the change. Some may feel threatened. Toxic personalities in particular may attempt to reassert dominance initially. They might escalate tactics to see if your self-respect is situational or stable. If your actions remain aligned, no overreaction, no retreat, they are forced to update their internal assessment of you. Self-respect also influences how neutral observers respond. In many environments, bystanders subconsciously follow the emotional lead of the person being targeted. If you appear shaken and reactive, the group may lean into that perception. If you remain grounded and assured, it becomes harder for others to justify mistreatment. The dynamic shifts from you being an easy focal point to you being a stable presence. That stability often reduces targeting because the social cost of disrespect increases while the psychological reward decreases. Silence and selective attention are strategic tools because attention is currency in human interaction. Toxic individuals often seek visibility, reaction, and engagement. When every comment they make receives acknowledgement, whether positive or negative, they remain reinforced. Even confrontation can feel rewarding because it keeps them at the center of emotional activity. Silence disrupts that cycle. It removes the spotlight. Strategic silence is not passive avoidance. It is an intentional decision not to energize behavior that thrives on response. When a sarcastic remark is met with no visible irritation, no counterargument, and no extended eye contact, the interaction loses momentum. The absence of reaction can feel disorienting to someone expecting friction. Without friction, there is no spark to ignite further exchange. Selective attention works in a similar way. You consciously choose what receives your engagement and what does not. Respectful communication is acknowledged. Provocation is ignored or met with brief, neutral replies. Over time, this conditions the dynamic. The behaviors that gain access to you are the ones that align with your standards. The behaviors that do not align fade from interaction because they produce no return. This approach also strengthens internal discipline. It requires resisting the impulse to defend, correct, or retaliate in every instance. That restraint signals control. When you decide that not every comment deserves your energy, you shift from reactive to deliberate. Toxic personalities often depend on pulling others into rapid exchanges where emotions override clarity. Selective attention slows the pace and places you back in charge of your participation. As the pattern repeats, the lack of engagement reduces incentive. Without attention, the behavior loses stimulation value. Many toxic patterns diminish when they are no longer fed by consistent emotional acknowledgement. Personal growth shifts identity, and identity determines what you tolerate, pursue, and engage with. When you begin developing emotional discipline, self-awareness, and confidence, your internal standards rise. You start recognizing patterns you once normalized. Comments that previously made you question yourself become easier to assess objectively. Manipulative tactics that once confused you become predictable. This clarity changes your responses naturally without forced effort. Toxic individuals often rely on outdated versions of you. They interact based on who you used to be, the person who over-explained, who sought validation, who feared conflict, or who tolerated subtle disrespect to maintain connection. When you evolve, their strategies no longer align with your current identity. The reactions they expect do not appear. The insecurities they once triggered are no longer as accessible. This creates a mismatch in the dynamic. Growth also alters your energy and availability. As you invest in your goals, routines, and healthier relationships, you have less time and emotional bandwidth for draining exchanges. Your focus shifts toward environments that reinforce your progress. Toxic interactions begin to feel more obviously misaligned with who you are becoming. That internal shift influences external behavior, shorter conversations, firmer boundaries, reduced access. There is also a psychological recalibration that occurs. When your sense of worth strengthens, you stop interpreting mistreatment as something to solve. You see it as information. Instead of trying to win approval or repair every misunderstanding, you evaluate whether the interaction deserves continuation. That evaluation reduces emotional entanglement. Over time, toxic people sense the reduced influence. Their comments no longer land with the same impact. Their attempts to provoke feel flat. As your identity solidifies, you no longer fit the role they assigned you. When influence diminishes and access narrows, many disengage because the dynamic that once benefited them no longer exists. Toxic people stop targeting you when the exchange no longer benefits them. Not because they've had a change of heart, not because you finally said the perfect words, but because the dynamic shifted. When you understand that their behavior feeds on reaction, blurred boundaries, inconsistency, and identity gaps, you stop trying to fix them and start refining yourself. You become calmer where you once reacted, clear where you once over-explained, consistent where you once wavered, silent where you once argued, focused where you once sought approval. And in doing so, you remove the reward. This isn't about becoming cold or distant. It's about becoming anchored in your values, anchored in your standards, anchored in your sense of self. Because when your identity strengthens, manipulation weakens. When your boundaries stabilize, testing decreases. When your attention becomes selective, provocation loses power. The truth is, toxic people look for leverage. And leverage only exists where there is emotional access without structure. Once access requires respect, once engagement requires alignment, once connection requires mutuality, the environment changes. Some will rise to meet your new standard, others will quietly drift away. Both outcomes serve you. In the end, what makes toxic people stop targeting you is not force, it's alignment. It's the quiet decision to no longer participate in dynamics that diminish you. And when you stop participating, the pattern has nowhere left to live.